Hello and welcome to this review of Winn-Dixie Premium Canadian Whiskey. Exclusive. Well, it is exclusive because you can only buy it at Winn-Dixie. Premium Canadian Whiskey with natural flavors. Winn-Dixie Liquors. 40% alcohol, 80 proof. Quality guaranteed. I guess you could bring it back if you don't like the quality. Winn-Dixie Liquors, like I said, Jacksonville, Florida. They have hundreds of stores in Florida. They have a few dozen in Louisiana and more in Mississippi, more in Alabama. All right, so southeastern grocery chain. So they got a fleur-de-lis, I guess, representing the French Canadians, and two lions representing the British Canadians, something like that. Probably hadn't changed labels since they started contracting with this. Winn-Dixie established in 1955. As long as I can remember, I can remember back in the 1980s they had this. Now, the label may have been somewhat different, but and it probably was always made by the Sazerac company. It says Wide World Importers, Frankfort, Kentucky, but it's another one of those alias names that Buffalo Trace uses to, obscure the fact that they're bottling it. And it's obviously made by Sazerac Canada at their Montreal distillery, because they have a big Canadian distillery there. Okay, so fine, I know there's Canadian Mist Distillery, and Sazerac owns the Canadian Mist brand, but I don't think they actually own the Canadian Mist Distillery. It's one of those weird things. Okay, the sun is almost at a 90-degree angle, so gotta take the cap off. Oh, it'd just be a big shadow on me. Put it in this Crown Royal glass. How's this going to compete with Crown Royal? I don't know. Canadian whiskey with natural flavors. Nothing remarkable there because Canadian whiskey oftentimes has natural flavors added, and they're not required to disclose it unless the wholesaler requests a certificate of disclosure of the ingredients. I was reading about that Government of Canada website. They said, but they didn't have any record of anybody ever asking for it. So they might have these forms, these paper forms from 1951 that have never been used. But the Sazerac, see, I know it is them. Well, I know Wide World Importers is an alias of Buffalo Trace, but also they always are good about putting the, let me make sure, Wide World. I was going to say Worldwide. Wide World Import. They're always good about putting a disclosure on there. I guess that's just the Sazerac / Buffalo Trace policy. If they add natural flavors, it'll always be on you're going to always see that on the labels. And if they add caramel color, they'll put that too. So that's a good practice. I mean, they're doing it as a courtesy. Certainly isn't required. So let you know a little bit more about the product, because by reading the label, you're not going to know much about the product. We know it's aged at least 3 years because that's the law in Canada. Any whiskey has to be aged at least 3 years. Does it have to be a certain percentage of corn? No. Rye? No. Wheat? Whiskey? No. Barley malt whiskey? It doesn't have to be a certain percentage of any of those. It just has to be whole grains, they said, aged in oak barrels for at least 3 years, and it has to be bottled and blended in Canada. Okay, what am I saying? Distilled, sorry about that mistake, I caught it. Distilled and blended in Canada. Distilled, blended, and aged, sorry. Distilled, blended, and aged in Canada. Bottled in America is allowed, because I know Canadian Club is bottled in Deerfield, Illinois. Canadian Mist is bottled at Frankfort now, Buffalo Trace, since they own it. This one here, Buffalo Trace. The question I have is, are they allowed to add the flavoring in the USA? By reading the Canadian government regulations on their government website, I didn't see anything about that saying that flavoring had to be done in Canada. So that might be a thing they could do down in Kentucky, but I mean, it'd probably be just as easy to do the flavoring in Canada, right? Whatever they're adding. Oftentimes, to me, it tastes like they're using a little bit of sherry wine, maybe dry sherry, but that would be allowed. It just can't go above I think it's 9.09% of the volume flavoring. But I think that's a common thing in Canada, that to use actual bourbon from the U.S. as a flavoring agent, or wine. And I think it's, a lot of times I think it's like dry sherry, or as they call it in the U.S., blending sherry. If you read the U.S. government regulations for blending materials, it says blending sherry is commonly used for, what did they say, for consistency of flavor and so forth, whatever. But in the U.S. it can't. It's not to exceed. It says NTE not to exceed 2.5%. So Canada has a higher allowance. All right. So I could be wrong. It could be vanilla. Yeah, but to me it tastes like they're using like a dry sherry. But blending sherry is the thing, right? North America, so it would make sense. Okay. Appearance, well, you know, you could fool somebody and make them think it's Crown Royal because it looks just like it. It's, you know, copper color. Crown Royal might be a shade lighter toward gold. Aroma. Get grains, mostly corn, we can imagine. Barley malt, that breadiness coming in. Rye, Canadian whiskey tends to be high rye, so you get that spiciness. Even a nickname for Canadian whiskey for a long time was rye whiskey. Yeah. Maybe a little sherry, like I said, but doesn't smell like it's overly flavored or anything. Smells like a good Canadian whiskey. They say, and it's premium. And remember, the exclusive means you can only get it at Winn-Dixie. Like it says, I was looking at the website. They do have a website listing. They were saying, this is how they described it. You can only get this at Winn-Dixie. That was the extent of the, plus the price. I paid $13.99. That fluctuates. $13.99, that would be the lowest you'll see this handle bottle. Sometimes it'll go up to $16.99, but it's oftentimes on discount. All right. Do they make glass bottles? Perhaps. I've never seen them. All right, taste. And these apparently are very popular. Well, I've seen them around, like usually at Mardi Gras parade parties, things like that. Or like people have a get-together to watch a football game. They'll have this in the rum and the Winn-Dixie tequila and the Winn-Dixie vodka and the Winn-Dixie gin, because they know people are going to drink a lot and they don't really want to pay for all of that, you know, too much. It's medium-bodied. It has a mostly dry finish, although there is sweetness in the finish. Get corn, like popcorn. Bread, crust, that would be the barley, I would think. Get some rye, spice. Now, John and Illy would probably say it tastes like almond extract added. Yeah, but I think a lot of times blending sherry, well, I never had blending sherry, but I've had dry sherry, I've had cocktail sherry, I've had cream sherry, I've had Taylor Sherry Excellent for Cooking, that's the name of it, Taylor Sherry Excellent for Cooking, formerly known as Taylor Cooking Sherry. But I think they got in trouble with the government on that, so they had to change it. And they do have, those, especially the Taylor, they'll have a nutty aspect. Yes. So that's definitely there. So I don't know how you would feel about a whiskey with a fairly strong sherry note. It makes it unique, well, at least relative to like American bourbons. They wouldn't have that. But, or American blended whiskeys, like I say, anything goes on those as far as flavoring, as long as it's a natural flavor and it's not to exceed 2.5%. I think it's pretty good. I don't know about going toe-to-toe with Crown Royal. Canadian Club or Windsor Canadian, but it might give them a run. I would not know that unless I did a blind taste test. So I'm gonna do a bunch of blind taste tests. Yeah, I'm gonna do it a tournament format. Put this Winn-Dixie up against the other ones that I have. Now, it's not too similar to Royal Canadian, the old brand from 1938. Not Crown Royal, Royal Canadian. That one's more like grain. Doesn't have a lot, really doesn't taste like they put any flavoring in it. It's not required to put flavoring in Canadian whiskey. It's an option. Doesn't taste like they exercised that option. Windsor Canadian I liked, but it's gone. This is not going to compete against 40 Creek. That's a little bit more deluxe Canadian whiskey. A little bit more, not too much more. But it's probably, if you took all the Sazerac Buffalo Trace Canadian whiskeys, and there are so many that they don't bother listing, there's a handful that they list, but the vast majority they don't tell you about. Yeah, James Fox is another one they bought in 1989 from Seagram's. Seagram's Canadian Hunter they bought from Seagram's, obviously, in 89 also, but they dropped the Seagram's name off of it and just call it Canadian Hunter. So yeah, it'll be a very interesting series. So if you've ever had Winn-Dixie Premium Canadian whiskey, let me know what you think. I am liking it. Now I thought, oh, I don't know what to think about this. I kept like skipping over it. Like, I don't want to try it. I wasn't scared to try it. Like two guys were reviewing bourbon I was watching on YouTube, and they were saying, I'm really scared to try it. And I put a comment, I was never scared to try bourbon. Like, why would you be scared? You know, that's dramatic. You might not like it, but you know it's not going to be that bad. I mean, enough's enough. I could say I need to save it for a review, but actually there's nowhere for me to review it, so I don't even think Winn-Dixie has a slot for that. But they might have a feature for that. I better go double check. Gonna have to drink some more. No, but honestly, I am gonna give it a 91 out of 100, 9.1 out of 10. It's surprisingly excellent, A-. So, just never know until you try them. And I think I'll be bringing in some more Winn-Dixie brand, courtesy of our friends at Wide World Distillers, but really Buffalo Trace, and see what those are like. Thanks for watching this video production, and I'm going to end this review by saying y'all go to Montreal, Canada, and take a Sazerac Canada distillery tour.